going to use some words which may seem a little strange, and perhaps bring in some ideas with which the average person is not entirely familiar. We ask, therefore, your indulgence, and to remember that after all, words are little bodies, and each word must have a soul in it. And if we are able to find the soul within words, then we experience their meaning. And out of this soul power also, we come a little nearer to the understanding of the common needs of mankind. We want to begin, therefore, by pointing out that Zen is not essentially a religion. It is not a philosophy. It is not a science. To the Zen master, Zen is only one thing: an immediate experience. It can occur to a person of any belief so long as that person is sincere. It cannot be conjured into existence by any ulterior motive. It is not a product of intellectualism, nor is it assured by the absence of intellectualism. This interior experience is perhaps best approached not dogmatically, but by trying to convey overtones. From the beginning, Zen has been a discipline of overtones. For 1,000 years it was perpetuated without a textbook. It is not given from master to disciple by lectures or orations. It is the silent communication of heart to heart, of soul to soul. Now, Zen is not essentially different from many of the great convictions of mankind, but perhaps it is the most completely organized expression of these convictions. It draws its authority from many sources. It brings them together and justifies them from the common experience of human beings seeking peace and hope and justice and integrity. In order, therefore, that we get some basic concept of our principle and be a little more familiar with the basic ideas, we will start with an old familiar figure to most thoughtful persons, grand old, homely old Socrates. This great Athenian commoner, one of the most beloved leaders of man's mental life, was once discoursing with his disciples concerning the mystery of the human soul. And to explain his discourse, he showed his disciples an empty glass. And then he took a handful of earth, and he placed the handful of earth in the glass. Then he took a pitcher of water, and he poured water upon the earth until the glass was filled. As a result, the glass was murky and disturbed, and there was a strange, muddy confusion of water and earth. Then Socrates took the glass in his hand and continued to shake it violently. The more he shook it, the more confused the elements became, until it was impossible to tell one from the other. Then Socrates said, "The earth is the body of man. This water is the symbol of his soul. By keeping this glass continually agitated, I will make certain that there can be no separation between the body and the soul. I shall keep the soul obscure with the mud of body. I will keep the body riled and agitated, until by this continual agitation I have achieved continual confusion. This is the state of man. By the continual agitation of his mind and his emotions, his inner life is continuously disturbed. It is impossible to discern the better part of him from the worst part. And when he thinks of himself, he does not know whether he thinks of the best part or the worst part. Now, how shall we clarify this? How shall we establish a discipline by means of which these two elements will be resolved to their natural relationships, and the obvious release of soul from the obscurity of matter can be accomplished? He said, my disciples, we cannot achieve this, but it can be achieved because nature has so ordained that it should be achieved. We accomplish our end not by our own effort, but by following nature. He said, I will now place this glass with its riled contents here on the table. And now, my disciples, we shall discourse of many subjects, and we shall leave the glass to itself. A little later he turned, and he spoke to his disciples again, and he said, now look at the glass. I have no longer agitated it. I have no longer kept it artificially confused. Therefore you will perceive that the lower parts have separated of themselves from the higher part. The earth has again fallen to the bottom. The upper water, signifying the soul, is clear again, and it is now possible to perceive the two parts in their proper and natural states. This has been accomplished by one thing only. I have stopped agitating the bottle. I have left it in peace. I have bestowed quietude upon it. I have no longer blown upon it with my thoughts and feelings. I have no longer confused it with hope and despair. I have simply allowed it to be quiet. And out of this stillness, nature has perfected its work. This is a concept which we find in Socratic philosophy. Namely, that man must continually, artificially agitate himself in order to remain ignorant. The moment he stops being ignorant or trying to be ignorant, he will gradually become wise, because this is the way of nature. This is what he was intended to accomplish, but he has never kept still long enough to enjoy his birthright. Now, far on the other side of the world, about nearly 600 years before the beginning of the Christian era, the great Indian philosopher Gautama Buddha sat down quietly on an old boulder on the side of a mountain which was called the Vulture's Peak. And here he discoursed with his disciples in the way in which it was done in those times, where the wise man sat by the side of the road, and those who honored gathered around him to listen to his words. And as they were quietly discoursing there, a farmer, a rustic, a man of no particular abilities, but with a great respect for the teacher, came to bring him an offering. He brought the only offering he had. He had taken from a pool not far away a beautiful lotus plant, and he brought this and he laid it in the lap of the Buddha. And Gautama looked down upon the lotus plant very quietly, and he said nothing. And everyone remained silent for a long time. And then one of the disciples rose and came and knelt before the teacher and said, Master, I have received the doctrine. And Gautama said, It is well, my son. Tell me what you have received. The disciple said, I have received it, Master, but I cannot tell you what it is. The Master said, That is good. you have received the doctrine. And out of this incident arose the foundation of Zen. Now that which had been placed in the lap of Buddha was a simple plant that had grown in a pool. This plant consisted of three parts: a leaf, a blossom, and a bud. And the strange symbolism of this trinity was to influence half the world more than any other symbolism that has ever been given to man. And in the philosophy of Zen, we find mingled many thoughts from ancient China and other parts of the world. Nearly 1,500 years ago, there flourished in India one of the most extraordinary institutions of learning of which we have any record. It was a great university where more than 25,000 students gathered to be instructed by more than 1,200 teachers. In this university was taught all arts and sciences, medicine and law, astronomy and architecture. Here also was taught all literature and all history, great systems of morality and ethics, and it is reported that in the 5th century A.D., in the University of Nalanda in India, Christianity was taught in India as comparative religion. Now we have no record of this, and the great university perished with the rise of Islam in India. But sometime while it was at its height, in the 5th or 6th century, there graduated from it a most peculiar man. He was a very heavy-set, broad-shouldered, athletic type of person, with an enormous face and very large eyes. He was perhaps a considerably exaggerated counterpart of dear old Socrates himself, and just about as handsome. This man was a blue-eyed Brahmin, and he wore a heavy red cloak, and he had a gristly beard and large golden rings in his ears. He had beetling brows and a bald head, and he was a strange, stern man. But he felt a call within himself, and he went forth out of India, and he made the long and dangerous journey to China. And there he remained and taught. His name was Bodhidharma, sometimes also called Daruma. And perhaps many of you have seen a picture of him, or a likeness of him sometime. Have you ever been in a toy store and seen a funny little red doll that looked like an egg, with a face painted on the front, and every time you tipped it over, it bounced up again? You couldn't tip it over because it was weighted in the bottom. This is Daruma, a favorite with children throughout Asia. This fact that you cannot tip him over is part of his philosophy. That he should be a toy is also part of his philosophy. Because there was one thing that Daruma did not want, and that is that anyone should venerate him. If they cared for him at all, he wanted them to love him as a child will love a doll or a toy. He wanted everyone who saw him to laugh. And with his general makeup, it was not impossible, because he was a rather humorous-looking person. About the 7th century of the Christian era, the teaching of this man reached Japan, where the doctrine of Zen, as we now know it, took root even more firmly than in any other part of Asia. And because it appealed to a certain basic simplicity in the Japanese consciousness, it flourished there and became one of the most powerful forces in the cultural development of its people. Now we may say, why should we worry about Zen over here? We have our own philosophies, we have our own ideas. I think the answer to that is the same as to ask the question, why should we listen to our parents? We are young and up and coming. Why should we listen to other people? Young folks generally do not wish to listen. and it becomes necessary for them to go through a number of unhappy experiences before they discover that perhaps their parents knew something. In the world of thought and philosophy, in a wonderful way, all that has gone before constitutes an elder. We can profit by the experiences of the past, because our own ways of life are changing. And somewhere in this world, peoples have gone through all the experiences that we go through. Sometimes they went through these experiences long ago, and their adventures are half forgotten. But by degrees we are realizing that this is truly one planet, that this planet is inhabited by one humanity, and that from the beginning of time, this humanity has had a wonderful capacity to get into trouble. Also, all over the world, there have arisen teachers, wonderful leaders, idealists, dreamers, saviors, sages, and saints, who have sought to help man. Though every type of humanity was essentially different, teachers could only help their own. But while races look differently and have different languages and different habitats, the essential problems of man are universal. A man is still hungry in any part of the earth. He can still be broken-hearted in any part of the earth. He can suffer war and pillage anywhere. He knows age, sickness, and death, regardless of country or land or language. Thus, in the great values, we are one people. And we are beginning to realize that as it is nice for us to have dishes, perhaps that were made in Denmark, or buy good woolens that are made in Scotland, or enjoy various art treasures and commodities from other parts of the world. So we should have a free exchange of ideas in order that each individual may enjoy the best of what the world knows. And any less adequate attitude is a prejudice of some kind. And prejudice doesn't help very much in time of trouble. Zen, under several different names, then, represents the convictions of many people, all involved in this wonderful mystery of the lotus blossom, the bud, and the leaf. So we will pause for a moment to try to understand this trinity. And in Asia, these three parts of the lotus symbolize the three parts of the universe with which man is concerned. The lotus flower is heaven, the leaf is earth, the bud is man. And the ancients devised this great trinity of heaven, earth, and man. This triad finds man suspended between heaven and earth. We remember the words of Goethe in his wonderful drama of Faust, where he says that there are two spirits within himself. One to the heaven aspires, and the other in the earth suspires. Heaven, earth, and man represent a strange, unbalanced balance. It is everywhere in Oriental art. It has come to us in the designs on beautiful bowls and cups. It is embroidered in fine silk. It is woven into brocades. It has returned to our Western life through flower arrangement. For Oriental flower arrangement is always the same: the blossom, the leaf, and the bud. Now, from this triad, China developed a very ancient doctrine which we know as Taoism, pronounced as though it was spelled with a D, but actually spelled with a T. So it is spelled Taoism and pronounced Taoism. Now, in this doctrine, heaven was the most important of all factors. Confucius and Lao Tzu have left us wonderful stories about the mystery of heaven and earth. Heaven is the eternal emperor. Imperial heaven is the ruler of all things. Confucius says, Heaven bestows, man receives. Everywhere in Eastern thinking, heaven moves all other things. And by a strange and wonderful alchemical marriage, heaven and earth were united. The son of heaven and earth was man. And in man is heaven, his upper part. And in man is earth, his lower part. If man inclines himself to the earth, he becomes a materialist. He becomes locked in mortal concerns. If he elevates himself toward heaven, he ascends to his own spiritual source. He becomes one with the principle of good, which is real everywhere in the universe. So all nobility causes man to rise to heaven. All selfishness impels him to fall back again into the earth. And because man has heaven and earth within himself, his nature is like the glass of water in the story of Socrates. By his doubts, he obscures heaven. By his various selfish and unreasonable actions, he keeps confusion constantly within his own nature. He has a little of hope, which is heaven, and a little of fear, which is earth. He has a little of good, which is heaven, a little of ill, which is earth. In him all polarities and opposites, a struggle for dominion over the mystery of his own nature. Now we are also told that heaven is motion, life. And the ancient Chinese scholar, looking out into the sky, saw forever the pageantry of stars, and he saw the planets moving along the golden road. And he saw the great Emperor of heaven, veiled in his infinite robes. He saw the mystery beyond mysteries, and he adored heaven. And to symbolize this, he made a flat disk of jade, about the size of a dinner plate and 1/4 of an inch thick. And in the center of this disk he put a circular opening. Now the circle became the symbol of heaven, because it was the sign of eternity. But man could not worship heaven in the form of a piece of jade. So he made an opening in the center of the jade where there was nothing. And when he wished to speak to heaven, he whispered into the hole in the center of the jade. Because that which was real he could make no picture of. He could not worship any form or likeness, because heaven was universal. Heaven was life itself. And they asked an old Chinese philosopher once, what was the shape of heaven? And he replied, what is the shape of water? If you put water in a square container, water is square. If you put it in a round bottle, it is round. If you put it in a flat dish, it is shallow. If you put it in a thin vase, it is deep. It is all shapes to all things, yet of itself it is beyond shape. This is truth, which can appear in all appearances, yet in its own nature is beyond all appearances. And then the Chinese also said, there is something about this heaven that is like water. Water is distinguished from earth. Again, Socrates' symbol of the soul as water, differentiated from earth. And the Chinese said, this water is like Tao, or eternity. Let us explain then this mystery. For behold, the sun gathers up water from the sea and lifts it into the air, and it becomes clouds. And in the form of clouds it is carried to the mountains. And on the mountains it becomes rain and falls again. And it falls to form little rivulets, and these come together to make brooks. And the brooks in turn unite to make rivers. And the rivers flow down the mountains and across the plains. And men live by the shores of the river, for this is the great Yangtze, the mother of waters. And they take their life from the river, and they build their homes beside it, and it waters their fields, and they sail upon it, and they catch fish from it, and they wash their clothes in it, and they drink it, and they bury their dead in it, and the sea keeps right on moving, this great water flowing forever. And finally the water, in the end, returns to the sea from which it came. This is the great cycle of life. This is Tao, the principle of life which sustains all things, which flows forever from itself to itself. And along the way, all creatures live dependent upon it, live nourished by it, live forever in the presence of its symbolism, live forever without understanding. This mystery, then, has something to do with consciousness. It has something to do that is very deep indeed with the life and experience of the human being. Now this Tao is very much like Zen. And it is Zen in turn which lines with Confucius to produce what may be considered the right or proper code for human life. Confucius says that the proper person is the superior man. Now this sounds at first a little arrogant, but as we understand his meaning more, we begin to find that he has made a very constructive and important statement. What is a superior man? According to Confucius, a superior man is simply a human being who has lost the capacity to perform an inferior action. Now this, of course, is a hard capacity to lose, and most folks don't make it. But it is still a very interesting thought. On one occasion, when Diogenes was speaking in the Athenian Forum, a Greek soldier who disagreed with him stood on a terrace above and spat on his head. Now this was quite a bad moment even for a philosopher. Diogenes looked up to see whether it was raining or not, and discovering the source of the insult, smiled rather benignly. He said, "You know, I have an idea that about this time I should be angry with you, but I have forgotten how." This is to a measure the concept of Confucius. The superior person is one in whose nature heaven leads. The superior person is the one in whose consciousness heaven flows. He is the one who is a receptacle or vessel for heaven, and has only one sincere and earnest desire, that he may express life, and that through him this life may flow to bring nourishment like the Yangtze River to all the millions who thirst after righteousness and of goodness and of right principles. So this superior being is the one in whose life beauty and truth have taken over. It is a person who has achieved the great quietude so that he may listen to the voice of heaven. Lao Tzu said, 3 kinds of men write poems. One for gain, so many dollars a line. One for fame, so that his name will be in print. The third, simply because he cannot help writing poetry. The third one alone is a poet. And this is the same concept, this motion from within, this motion of eternity conquering time as an experience of human consciousness. So with perhaps these few little introductory scattered remarks, we can come more directly to the very heart of the problem of Zen. Perhaps we can now appreciate that Zen is non-creedal, that it has nothing to do with names or places or persons primarily. It has to do with something that every human heart must some way learn to understand and apply. Let us then try to find a few simple things out of this Eastern psychology, by means of which perhaps we can help to organize our Western way of life. One thing that I think Zen does for us is to live life out of historical context. Up to the present time, many persons have lived by history alone. Also, they have worshipped history. They have not realized one of the principles that Zen points out. This heaven, the open blossom of the lotus, this ever-flowing imperial sky, has within itself the locked mystery of all dimensions. Up and down, in and out, forward and backward, yesterday and tomorrow, time and eternity, beginning and end, are all locked within the mystery of heaven. And in this locking of all dimensions, the Zen thinker points out that heaven itself is superior to all these things, that they exist because of it. It is the master. They are merely expressions or avenues for its expression. In common parlance, the life of man is divided into three parts: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Zen points out, however, that the only one of those parts that is real is the heaven part. And that heaven part is now. There is no time in all the world but now. What we call the past is simply man remembering the past now. All that we have of the future is man's hope for the future, which he is hoping now. The individual, however, has made now negative. He has permitted the past to flow in and fill the now. One of the rewards of this is to be a psychotic. He has no longer the power to make any decision now. He has mortgaged now to yesterday. Plato said the same thing when he made the remark, "The living are ruled by the dead." You are a living person. You are living now. Are you ruled by yesterday? Are you tied into a strange complex because of memory? Are you doing things today simply because you've always done them that way? Is today overshadowed by regret, by remorse? Are you trying to live today by the rule of yesterday? Are you completely historical? If you are, you will probably ultimately become completely hysterical. Is today merely a moment in which you are trying to get over yesterday? Is today a measure measured by yesterday? Are you still carrying the prejudice of yesterday? Are you still making the mistakes of yesterday? Are you still trying to live by a code of conduct that was enough for yesterday, but may not be enough for today? Are you bringing forward the hates of yesterday? Are you bringing forward the gloom and the unpleasantness and the fear of yesterday? Is actually your present mind a haunted house ruled over by spirits and ghosts who rattle chains all night? Actually, is your sleep and your dream merely a way in which yesterday escapes through psychic symbolism to plague today? Are you therefore a servant to a series of dead things? Everything that you did yesterday is dead. It lives only in your memory. And if by some strange reason you develop amnesia, all of this death all of this past ceases to exist. Most people consider such amnesia a disaster, and yet we go to hospitals and have shock therapy to create it in an emergency, because we find that some people simply cannot continue to live with yesterday without finally falling to pieces now. This yesterday problem is a very big one. Now, as a compensation for yesterday, which is full of its regrets, we have tomorrow, and tomorrow is the Shangri-La we live for now. In tomorrow, everything is going to come out all right. But don't forget that today was tomorrow yesterday. Don't forget that this endless motion of time is causing us forever to transmute tomorrows into yesterdays. They go by so fast that the only part of this wonderful and rapid motion that gets no attention is now. This now is lost in the rapid motion of things. Dashing after tomorrow, trying to get over yesterday, we have no immediate focus whatever. We are trying to escape in one direction, toward, and in the other direction, from. But Zen points out that no matter how fast you run, you can never outrun yourself. Yesterday was miserable because of you. Tomorrow will be miserable because of you. For wherever you go and whatever happens, you must live with yourself. You can't do anything about the self of yesterday, and it's a rather abstract job to try to do anything about the self of tomorrow. But the key is now. This is the moment in which you can do anything. But you say the moment is gone. Even as we speak, now becomes the past. That may be true, but there is one difference. Time moves on, but the now stays with us. Man is a creature that can only live now. Everything else is a psychological emergency. The individual is only part of the past because he believes it. He is only non-contemporary because he binds himself to something outside of himself, time. And time becomes the greatest tyrant in his life. He cannot escape the tyranny of the passing hour. So Zen takes this simple attitude. The world around us is not an illusion. You can reach out and touch a chair. The chair is there. There's no doubt about it. But some way the chair is not real. The chair belongs to a world of things. Man does not. Man is a life. Man is a principle. Put him in a square bottle and he is square. Put him in a round bottle and he is round. But man has an existence apart from square and round. Of himself, he is always himself. This is his hope. His great hope, therefore, is to extricate himself from the curious dilemma of his own thinking, of his own mind, of the burdens which he has cast upon himself. Now, how are we going to get the individual free from yesterday and tomorrow so that he can have a life? Now, some people say, well, if he gets away from yesterday and tomorrow, he's going to be very improvident. He's going to lose all his moral and ethical background. He is going to become a very dangerous citizen. Because, after all, we need the moral instruction of the past. We also need the vivid hope of the future to keep us moving. This is not as true as it seems to be. The only reason we lean upon the past and the future is because the present is a vacuum. Make the present right. That which is good in the past will live, and the rest will cease. Make the present right, and that which is necessary to the future will come, and that which is unnecessary will not appear to plague us. So the great problem is this problem of immediate rightness. The next point that Zen would like to emphasize is the fact that according to history, and to nearly all historical circumstances, man is a victim. He is a victim of his time. Most persons wish they had lived some other time when things were much better. They will always wish this. Sometimes they look back on the dear old, good old times, which were probably just as troublesome as now, but in a little different way. We are always looking back to the peace of a golden age and forward to some paradise to come. The individual, therefore, feels a tremendous sense of bondage. He cannot change his world, therefore he must suffer with it, is the common attitude. He tries desperately to be a little better than those around him. No one pays much attention to him. In fact, he's probably cheated occasionally as a result of his improved intentions. Zen would point out, however, that a man is not cheated because he's better. He's cheated because he's foolish. And improvement in morale or improvement in integrity, these have nothing to do with gullibility. In fact, it is the individual who tries to be intensely practical and to keep all the taboos and policies and practices of his time is cheated the most. And he is finally, because he is so practical, cheated out of life itself. This is not the answer. Actually, Zen points out that no matter how corrupt the world becomes, how selfish and stupid everyone else may be, each individual can be as wise, as happy, and as good as he wishes to be. No one can prevent another man from becoming wise. No one can prevent a wise man from being happy. Nero tried it. He was only able to destroy bodies. He could not touch souls. Once the inner life is established in realities, no corruption of society can touch it. But until it is so established, it can never be safe. Security, therefore, is the victory of heaven over earth. It is the victory of now over all other time. And it is the victory of self over circumstance. Nothing in the world can keep us foolish but ourselves. Nothing can make us miserable but ourselves. Other people can do their best to make us unhappy. But if the individual has the heaven consciousness inside himself, he cannot be touched. Thus Zen, following Lao Tzu and Confucius, points out that this is the only concept known to man which is just. Any idea, any belief that one individual can be made miserable by another or be the victim of the evil of another, any such concept must be unjust, must be unfair. And in Zen, the universe cannot be unfair. The universe must be just. Therefore, heaven does not punish. Man punishes himself by disobeying heaven. Heaven cannot bring infirmity, but the man who disobeys heaven becomes infirm. Heaven will not bestow war, but men who do not love peace will depart from heaven and will have war. Therefore, man, by the power that he possesses within himself, may either seek heaven or depart from heaven. He may choose. He has the power of limited determinism within himself. He may make his own decisions, and his decisions bring him peace or conflict, entirely upon one principle: do they obey or do they disobey heaven? Man therefore lives in a world in which good can never fail. We are sometimes worried that sometime, perhaps, evil will become master of the world. Zen says no, evil cannot ever become the master of the world, for the reason that all evil things oppose each other. Evil men fight each other. Evil ideas conflict with each other. Evil policies corrupt each other. But all good things build good. Therefore, all good things work together. All bad things work against each other. Thus, good is forever preserving itself. Evil is ever destroying itself. Thus, in Zen, reality as a state of consciousness is ever developing and releasing itself. Illusion as a state of consciousness is forever destroying itself. And when all illusion destroys itself, only heaven can remain. For that and that alone can be real. So the individual gains a certain assurance that he may live according to heaven. And that if he so does, the heaven part, not only of himself, but of all existence, must sustain him. But this sustaining is of the substance of heaven. An individual may have to sacrifice something of illusion if he wishes the strength of reality. He cannot live upon two levels of consciousness at the same time. Therefore, if he seeks heaven, he must voluntarily depart from the unreasonable excess of earth. This does not mean that he must depart from earth, but he must depart from a wrong interpretation of it. He must depart from selfishness and superstition and ignorance and fear, or he cannot know heaven. But if he finds heaven, it is more than all that which he has sacrificed in the attainment of it. Then, therefore, becomes the champion of the simple way. The simple way is the way of heaven. The simple way is the way of human dignity. It is proper and correct, according to Confucius, that each individual should represent heaven. And in order to represent heaven, he must be universal, for heaven is universal. He can have no barriers in himself. He can have no walls in his own consciousness. He cannot be for anything or against anything, for heaven is. And heaven alone decides the virtues and demerits of everything that exists. The Zen philosophy points out the wonderful simplicity of heaven, especially in matters of instruction. In the teaching of man, men are impatient, but heaven is always patient. Heaven never wags its finger at you. Heaven never says, tish, 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 you can't do that. Heaven has one quality which survives all the mistakes of men. That is endurance. Heaven never obviously interferes, but heaven never gives up. A man may depart from it for ages and try to build his own house upon the sands of his own purposes. In the end, heaven will win. One of the Zen fables has to do with a great city that men built in a jungle. And finally the city was deserted. And in a short time the jungle moved in. Stone by stone was broken apart by roots and twigs and creepers. And after a time there was only the green jungle. The city was gone. All things built by men that are contrary to heaven will fall. Time is unimportant. All men also must find heaven or supper. For some it is a day, for some perhaps it is unknown aeons of time. But men must find heaven. There is no other way of surviving. Heaven's very simple and direct lessons to us are not taught in great books. They are swept with brushes of light across the sky. Everything we see around us that is natural and that is real tells us the story of heaven. And everything around us that is not quite so good and not quite so permanent and not quite so happy tells the story of man. Therefore, man builds an empire of his own in the midst of heaven. If he builds it wisely, heaven will sustain it. If he builds it badly, heaven will force it to crumble in the presence of immutable law. In this process of man shaking his fist at heaven and trying to do it his own way, regardless of cost, we have evidence of supreme ignorance. Confucius says, the man who is not aware of heaven is ignorant. The individual who does not know enough to obey heaven is ignorant. The individual who believes honestly that he can disobey heaven is stupid. None of these people can win. Yet we have fought and struggled for ages to outwit this mysterious archetype, this mysterious energy, this mysterious life which flows forever according to its own laws and will never change. There's only one answer. Man must go into partnership with it. Man must admit that heaven leads and man follows. If man follows heaven, he is healthy, happy, wise, and adjusted. If he departs from heaven, he cuts himself off from all this share of good things. Once upon a time, there was a man who liked to eat too much. You've heard of such people. And because he was very unwise in his diet, and also catered largely to his appetites, which were very artificial, he had dyspepsia. And his doctor gave him a little pink pill to take after each meal. One day when he was talking to a friend, he reached into his pocket, took out the bottle of pills, took one of the pills. He said, I have a little streak of dyspepsia this afternoon. I guess I must have broken a law. Friend looked at him and said, well, you do look kind of pale. You look rather miserable and you feel very uncomfortable. But I don't think you broke a law. I think the law broke you. This is sound Zen. Sickness is not because we break laws, because laws break us. Unhappiness is not because we have succeeded in breaking a law. Man has never broken a law of heaven and never will. He may try, but the law breaks him. And the penalty of this mistake in judgment is to be traced in the red, bloody inscriptions upon the pages of history. The sorrow, the miseries of mankind. Zen says that all this also centers up or adds up to a present situation that needs a little attention here and now. We admire particularly certain aspects of Oriental civilization. Other parts we do not admire. Let us also remember that the fact that a man is born on the other side of the earth does not make him any more able to live well than if he is born on this side of the earth. We do not measure the truth of philosophies by the failures of men. We measure all things in terms of the will of heaven. That which is true is true. Who lives that will lives. Who disobeys that will dies. Geography has nothing to do with it. But if we find somewhere a law about that will which helps us to understand, we can obey and live and disobey and die. There is no rule preventing these patterns. But once we come under the rulership of one, we must accept the consequences of our own actions. In the East, therefore, there is this growing tendency, which we are rather enjoying in this world, and that is the process of uncluttering ourselves. We discover that a cluttered life is a symbol of a cluttered self. That living in an environmental confusion is merely the story of our own confusion. Gradually we have come to so disproportion our sense of values that a good house cleaning is very necessary. And one way to achieve this kind of house cleaning is to begin to discriminate value, to gradually grow in terms of appreciation. For the entrance to a better life is through the gate of appreciation. We cannot all perform all things any more than we can all be great musicians, but we can appreciate great music. We can love it. We can move toward it, just as we appreciate heaven and move toward it, though we may not be able to copy all its ways, certainly not immediately. So appreciation is man's experience of the presence of the good and his gratitude for the privilege of having a share in that which is good. Appreciation strengthens discrimination. And discrimination is man's faculty which can discover that which is important. And having discovered that which is important, apply his willpower to the preservation of that which he has discovered. Discrimination and appreciation simplify life. They cause the individual to turn instinctively away from that which is not good and cultivate, also with instinct, that which is good. The gradual result of this is uncluttering. Now, uncluttering of the things around you is symbolic. It is an action for a purpose beyond itself. To unclutter your environment is to begin the process of untying the psychic knot in yourself. Most persons are all tied up in knots these days. This tension means an interior cluttering, just exactly as bewilderment may arise from an exterior cluttering. We have 50 kinds of soap, each one proclaimed to be the best. This is confusing. Trying to decide among these is cluttering. And by the time we have made this decision, the precious moment of now has slipped into the hopeless ocean of the past, and we have lost time and energy. We must unclutter not only the things around us, but this tendency to complexity within ourselves. One way to unclutter is to try to determine what is important and what is not important, what is good and what is not good. And of course, the quickest and easiest way of all uncluttering is straight thinking. Now, a straight thought is a mysterious thing in our way of life because every day we are tempted and urged and almost required to think crooked. A little straight thinking would put some great enterprises out of business. A little straight thinking would lift the average family out of debt. A little straight thinking would reduce worry for all of us. But it would be very unsettling to the profit system. Therefore, we maintain this concept of profit by a continuous loss within ourselves. We go on with this long enough and finally we're all sick. Now, with this problem of uncluttering comes this sense of appreciation and also the sense of gratitude. And gratitude is a very sensitive and wonderful thing. All these different small attainments brought together result in one essential attainment, and that is sensitivity to truth. Sensitivity to truth means sensitivity to value. Sensitivity means penetration. It means the power of the consciousness to express value, to discover value, to weigh all things and cling to value. Therefore, the ancients have a term, right mindfulness. And Zen is a strange, a peculiar concept of right mindfulness, which achieves its end by cutting away most of the products of mind, on the ground that only a small part of thinking is right-minded. Now let's try to find a few little simple examples of what we mean by right-mindedness. A right-mindedness which is warm and which brings things close to life. Now we cannot expect the average Western person to suddenly develop an immediate and total right-mindedness. But right-mindedness is a gentle, kindly, sympathetic addiction to truth. It is a continuous appreciation of the works of truth and brings with it the instinct to value that which is valuable. And out of that comes one of the great doctrines of Zen, or rather one of the areas in which Zen has had a tremendous influence. In Japan, the code of life is called Bushido. This is sometimes called the code of the samurai. It is the code of the gentleman. The root of this code is very simple: death before dishonor. This code is not always lived well. It cannot be. But long ago, Shitoko Taishi, the great regent of Japan, established a code for the swashbuckling double sword men called samurai. He says in one of these codes, and unfortunately his fellow citizens didn't listen too well, he said, a brave man draws his sword. The braver man does not. This is Bushido. Now in Bushido, we also have a trend to something else called Shibui. And this is astringency, the dynamic life of immediate recognition of value. Now it's a practice and an exercise at first. Let us see what comes out of a partnership between Bushido, Zen, and Shibui. In the old days, when a man had an old newspaper, of course newspapers were harder to come by then than they are now, because they were all hand-cut from blocks of wood and printed by hand. In fact, today there are daily newspapers in Asia which are still cut one letter at a time on a slab of wood and gotten out the same day the news arrives. This is quite a little trick in itself. But when you have finished a newspaper in certain of the better circles where Bushido dominates, you don't toss that newspaper away. You don't light a fire with it. You don't wrap fish in it. A newspaper has brought you knowledge. Perhaps they have more knowledge in them in those areas. But in any event, when you do not want it anymore, you give it honorable burial. You take the old book or the old newspaper or the old pair of shoes and you thank them. You say, you have served me faithfully and well. I'm not going to toss you out on the street and humiliate you any more than I would toss out on the street and humiliate my own father. So perhaps The kindly, gentle old gentleman who has this problem on his hands goes in the backyard, digs a little grave, buries the old newspaper, says a little prayer, and puts a flower on the grave. Why? Because he cannot help feeling like the old newspaper himself. How would he like to be treated? There's a very interesting and beautiful little story in one of the books of Lefcadio Hearn about the tailor who went out to bury his broken needle. That needle had served him well. It had served his father before him, and finally, out of the greatness of years, it broke. He would not toss that into the wastebasket. He took it out quietly, thanked its soul, released its soul, and gave it an honorable burial. This is Zen. It is this strange thoughtfulness about things. This little burial of the old paper was an experience of consciousness. It was not that the man did not know it was an old newspaper. It was not simply that tradition forced this upon him. It was because somewhere in his heart he experienced being a newspaper. If you go to an interesting home among some of the people who know these doctrines, and you find that the dinners are set for 12, you will perhaps be surprised by the fact that no two plates match. This is not because these people cannot make matched dishes. They make them for consumption in the West all the time. But matched sets are export pieces. They are made for other people who like matched sets. Why do these other people do not match their sets? Very simple. You do not buy a dozen plates. You buy always one plate. Why do you buy it? Because you like it. Because it is beautiful. Because it pleases you. Things do not please you by the dozen. Tomorrow you will find another plate that will give great joy to your soul. So in the course of years, you gather 12 plates. Each one is a joyous experience in appreciation, in value, in having done something that gave real pleasure to your consciousness. So you prepare for your dinner. Now comes another fine little example of Bushido. You have 12 guests. Which guest will most appreciate which plate? Now this is important. And it is more important than arguing over politics. It is more important than watching murder on TV. This is important. You try to understand your guest. You know that this man has a certain degree of culture. This plate will please him. His dinner will taste a little better. And when he arrives and he sees this, says, "My, how thoughtful my host was." Now the food, if the family is not very rich, may be mostly raw fish and rice. But the meal is in the taste, the thoughtfulness, the understanding, the kindness. This is Bushido. This is thoughtfulness. And once the individual begins to master it, it begins to change him. He suddenly finds he has more time for things that are important and less time for things that are not important. There's an old saying that in ancient days the Chinese put fingernail guards on their fingers, particularly the third and fourth finger. These guards were sometimes 6 inches in length, and the fingernail underneath was never cut, but was protected by these guards. Now, to our Western thinking, that would be a champion example of foolishness. Perhaps it was a little foolish even in China, But there was an idea beneath it. If you have ever tried to pick up something with this accumulation of gold and silver claws, you know what I mean. You can't do it this way. You've got to reach over very carefully, pick it up, and put it there. This, in a sense, is Zen. Nothing should ever pass through your hands unnoticed. Everything you touch has a lesson. If you are too busy to learn it, these guards on your fingernails will make your hands so clumsy that you have to stop and think, or else spill everything. So it is again a pointing up. The little teacup that goes by is a beautiful thing if you have time to enjoy it. It is nothing but a cup if you have no time. The man who has no time for beauty has no time for life. He will have no beauty in his soul, and such as have not this beauty, these are the ones that are fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. I once was entertained in a family where they served tea in little cups that were as thin as eggshells. Each was different. Each was so fragile that a clumsy Westerner was almost afraid to touch them at all. Yet those cups had been used every day in that family for nearly 200 years, and not one had been cracked. This is shibboleth. Now you might say no one would ever get over dishwashing on that basis, that all our time would be wasted in all these trivialities. But in truth it does not work that way. Why? Because when you put your whole attention to a thing, it is done quickly. It is done easily. It is done safely. And the simple process of fulfilling your duties and responsibilities to those things which are peculiarly your children, for the cup you own is your child. This gives great value, great experience. I was talking not long ago with an art dealer. And he said, you know, it is sometimes very difficult to impress people who collect things with one very important fact. In this world, no one ever owns anything except himself. Whatever you have only as a trustee. Therefore, you have a strange and solemn duty. Perhaps you do not appreciate this particular item. If you do not appreciate it, you should not have it. You should not buy it. But if you do buy it, you should realize that you are the custodian of something a man 1,000 years from now might give his life to possess. Whatever you have not for yourself, but to pass on to the ages. Everything you destroy is a break between man and the beauty of tomorrow. Keep these things. Love these things. And even more so, accept the responsibilities of this simple, kindly way, for it applies to your children. It applies to your home, your friends, everything that is vital and necessary to you. Continuing right mindfulness is to protect all things because heaven is in them. Heaven is in the beautiful line. Heaven is between the lines of the poem. Heaven is in the good book. Heaven is in the eyes of your children. Heaven is everywhere. Serve heaven and you will be happy. Serve only yourself and you will be sad. For heaven rules and men obey. And little by little something will happen. You will become rather quiet. You will find that it is no longer necessary for your pleasure that you extrovert wildly, nor that you introvert desperately. You do not need to be entertained by costly inventions. You do not need to have so many things. For the man who has found heaven has found all things. Gradually out of this comes the very acme of Zen as a philosophy for Western man, and that is a sort of quiet reverence toward life. Everything in life is important. The happiness of your friend is important. The good of your child is important. The right of the flower to bloom is important. All these things belong to heaven. And between heaven and earth stands man. Man is the servant of heaven and the guardian of the earth. The earth is his garden. Here he makes flowers or weeds to grow. And for what his harvest is, he is accountable to heaven. Heaven has provided him all things necessary. Out of his own understanding, he must apply that which he has to everything that he needs. Quietly, peacefully, heaven moves into his experience. It is a good experience. And then comes this quiet union with life, in which suddenly the individual senses his own universality. He realizes, as Zen ultimately points out, that after all, even man is only an appearance. Man is another way of heaven. Man is the bud of heaven. One of these days he shall burst open like the great lotus, and he shall be heaven. He shall be these things. He shall find in his union with eternal life the fulfillment of his every hope, his every desire, and his every dream. He finds union with heaven or with God by doing the works of heaven. We are close to that which we are like, and ever separate from that with which we are dissimilar. If we are like the earth, we are close to the earth. If we are like heaven, we are near to heaven. And that which is God-like stands forever in the presence of God. So Zen is this quiet becoming like heaven, becoming all thoughtful, all bestowing, all protecting, all serving. God loves all things that it has created, and it has fashioned man in the image of its own nature. Man who is godlike serves the creations of God, unfolds the God in himself, discovers the God in others, and draws pictures in the air, sings songs, writes poems, and builds for the greater glory of God. This quietude, this peace, this at-one-ment with eternal value and eternal principle, this is Zen. And it is attained by Shibui. And Shibui is the simplification of all things. It is the ability to live in a gentle surrounding in which everything is modest, everything is beautiful, everything is proper, and everything is mindful. In the Japanese home, there is a tokonoma. This is a little place on the side of the room like an alcove, perhaps about the size of the average Western fireplace. The tokonoma is the center of art in the home. In it will generally be found one picture, a beautiful painting if possible, or perhaps only a beautiful column of native characters exquisitely written and telling some simple, beautiful message. Beside and below, off balance, will be found a flower arrangement with all of its wonderful branches and twigs arranged by a strange but inscrutable law, and perhaps down on the other corner somewhere a little bowl, a precious thing but very simple. even perhaps to our mind a little crude. This is art. This is home. This is the shrine of the simple beauty. These people would never think of hanging up 20 pictures. They see some of our overstuffed furniture, they wince. They just can't understand these things. Perhaps the family has many treasures, but in order that we may appreciate them, it shows one at a time. A little later it puts the painting away and there's another painting. But these three articles in the tokonoma always symbolize heaven, earth, and man. They symbolize the wonderful balance that man shall protect the earth, that he shall adore heaven, and that he shall live well. This simple code is the basis of Bushido. It is the basis of the strong, quiet principle of Zen. Once we have experienced it, we find something of great importance. We find gradually moving out of ourselves everything that is necessary. Here truly we have the water of life. And if we drink of this water that flows from our own center of consciousness, we shall never thirst again. For gradually, this inner life bestows all grace to the spirit and the mind and the body. The person becomes lovable, irresistible, mature, dependable, understanding. Where Zen is, no individual can misunderstand. No one can be intemperate or intolerant in his attitudes, because he has found this simple center of peace within himself. And he knows that when he finds peace inside, he finds it according to the will of heaven. He knows that this is the only peace that surpasseth understanding. He knows that this peace can never fail him. He also knows that he becomes a kind of lantern through which this peace shines out. He has a better family, a better home. He is better respected, more admired, simply because he has become the superior person. He has become superior to the performance of an inferior action. Thoughtful in small things, he has no great emergencies. Gentle in causation, he can live with the effects of his own actions, because he thinks right, feels right, and acts right. There are no evil birds to come home to roost under his eaves. He lives in the light and in the law. And in this he feels that he has fulfilled whatever faith he belongs to. It has given him new insight into his religion. It has made his religion a living part of himself, not something to be believed by the mind or spoken by the lips, but something that has become an experience, the graciousness of the power of God over matter. This is the concept of Zen. I know I've simplified it very much, and I've left out most of the technical aspects, but this, I think, is a psychological message we can use in this day of cluttering, in this day of knotted, twisted, distorted pressures. The simple process of straightening out the thread of life, of simply unknotting, relaxing, not because we are trying to force some kind of composure on an overwrought life, but because little by little we have come to love things that are relaxing of themselves. The beautiful picture, the wonderful little bowl, the vase of flowers. These do not add to tension. They take away tension. And the more we come to love the simple and the beautiful, the safer we are against the complex and the disformed or disordered. It is a matter of training taste, training discrimination, training refinement, training thoughtfulness. And the reward for this training is a better life. For all things must be earned, and those who seek to earn heaven must do so by keeping the rules of heaven. This was the old way. We have been inclined to forget. Perhaps it would be wise if we remember again. Well, time is up, and thank you very much.